It's 1988, and we're in the city of Xi'an in central China. A man has just picked up his 2-year-old son from nursery, and they're walking home. The boy, he's called Jaja, is thirsty. He wants some water. They stop walking, and his dad goes into a nearby hotel to get him some. He leaves his son outside, which, in the 80s, isn't an unusual thing to do. When his dad returns, just minutes later, Jaja is gone. It's estimated that as many as 100,000 children go missing in China every year, a staggering number that links back to the 1970s and the one-child policy. This story is about one of those missing children and about a mother who spent decades searching for him. This is True Crime Reports, a global crime show from Al Jazeera. Today's episode, the hidden victims of China's one-child policy. Our story starts in China's province of Shanxi. Its capital city, Xi'an, sits at the northern foot of the enormous Qin Mountains, and it's a vast place. It's the second most visited tourist spot in the country, probably because it's where you can see the famed Terracotta Army. In 1986, when our story begins, Xi'an's home to 1.6 million people. This includes Li Jingxian, a slight woman with shoulder-length hair and glasses, her husband, Mao Zhangjing, and their newborn son. His name's Mao Yin, but they give him a nickname, Jaja. It means great. Jaja is a lively toddler. His mum will later describe him to journalists as a happy child, sensible and smart. The kind of kid everyone likes when they see him. His parents adore him. They take him to the zoo or the park at weekends, and he spends weekdays at kindergarten. His mum will later describe that time they spent together as a family as very happy. Now, when Li Jingxian isn't at home with her husband and son, she's out working for a company that exports grain. During the harvest, she has to leave the city for periods at a time to visit suppliers out in the countryside, and her husband stays at home to look after Jaja. It's on one such occasion that their lives change forever. It's the 17th of October, 1988. It's the end of the workday, and Mao Zhangjing is walking home with his son. But Jaja's thirsty, and Mao Zhangjing leaves him outside while he pops into a hotel they're passing to get some water. 2 minutes later, he steps back outside. His son is nowhere to be found.
His dad, he didn't know if he was lost or if he was gone.
This is Nikwi Hoogland. She works with children in China who've been separated from their biological families.
After a while, they've seen their biggest fears came true because their son was abducted, was kidnapped.
Many miles away, out in the countryside, Li Jingxian gets a telegram from her employers. It's got 6 words on it: emergency at home, return right away. She races back to the city. Her manager is there to break the news to her. Her mind goes blank. Later, when describing her thought process, she'll say she was convinced he was just lost. Surely someone will bring him home or will find him. It doesn't occur to her that they might not. A week later, there's still no sign of Jaja. Nobody's handed him in to the police, and Li Jingxian and her husband are losing hope. Now, through her work, Nikwi has met a lot of parents whose children have been abducted, and she says there's something that many of them have in common.
What I see in some birth parents is a lot of guilt within them and a shame. I must say shame, maybe not guilt, but like they feel so ashamed of themselves, and in that shame, they are too afraid to look for their children. And I see a lot of birth parents that try to live their lives, but I think it's always that nagging feeling inside for them, because You're parents of a child, of a baby. It's part of your DNA.
For Li Jingzhi, that nagging feeling will grow into something she can't ignore. It will become her main motivator, her overwhelming driving force that will overshadow the next 32 years. She starts with the local neighbourhood. When she's not at work, she paces the area where Jaja was last seen, asking anyone she meets if they've seen him. Then she spreads out. She places missing persons ads in the newspapers. She prints out flyers with his photo on, 100,000 of them, and hands them out desperately at Xi'an's train and bus stations. The weeks turn into months, and there's no news. Li Jingzhi's desperation builds. She spreads her search even wider. One Friday evening, she takes a train to a different city and hands out flyers there. She returns on Sunday, ready for work on Monday. This becomes her new routine. Every weekend, she takes a train or bus to a new city, sometimes leaving the province altogether, asking everyone she sees if they've seen her son. When that becomes too much, she quits her job and throws herself into the task full force. She ticks off city after city, and the net of her search slowly expands, with Xi'an at the centre. Here's Nikwi.
She searched for a very, very, very long time, and she fought so hard and tried so hard to get her son back. I can't imagine for her how it felt to miss such a big part of your life.
One day, Li Jingzhi hears something that makes her ears prick up. Someone tells her about a couple who lives out in the countryside, who've just adopted a young boy. Apparently, he looks exactly like Jaja. Li Jingzhi immediately boards a long-distance bus out of Xi'an. She reaches a different city and gets on a local bus out into the countryside. It's a long journey, but eventually she arrives in the village where the couple lives. But nobody's there. They're all out on the fields, working. Li Jingzhi waits all day, and when the villagers finally return that evening, she asks them about the couple and the boy. The villagers know immediately who she's talking about. Yes, that's right, they adopted a boy from the city, she's told, but they've taken him back to Xi'an. She waits for the next bus to arrive and makes the long journey back home. She arrives early in the morning and spends hours looking for the flat she's been told the couple are renting. Amazingly, she finds it, but again, her luck is out. The landlord tells her the couple left 2 days ago with the boy. They've moved to a different town. Over the next 2 days, Li Jingzhi doesn't sleep and barely eats as she follows lead after lead, talking to people who know the couple, travelling to hotels where she thinks they could be, even tracking down the man's parents' house. Eventually, she finds them, the wife and a little boy. But when she sees the boy's face, she realises it was all for nothing. It's not him. Back at home, Li Jingzhi starts to hear her son's voice in her head, calling for her at night. The months turn into years. Memories of him haunt her. His clothes, his little shoes, his toys are still everywhere in their home. She can't bear it, so her sister comes round and packs it all away into a box. She'll later say, if I didn't try to control my emotions, I might really go crazy. If I become insane, I wouldn't be able to go out and look for my child. And one day, if my child came back and saw a crazy mother, it would be so pitiful for him. Li Jingzhi and her husband begin to argue. Since that day outside the hotel, they've spoken of little else. It's become an obsession, and their grief is driving them apart. The year 1992 marks 4 years since Jaja disappeared. Li Jingzhi and her husband divorce, and she continues her anguished search alone. But little does she know, she's not actually alone. There are thousands of others just like her. I worked in Beijing for 6 years, and stories of China's missing children is something I heard about often. It seemed to be almost part of the cultural ether.
Child trafficking has been a prevalent problem in China's history long before the establishment of communist China.
This is Jingxian Wang, a sociological researcher from King's College London. She's done extensive research into the child trafficking industry in China and speaks of an organisation called Baby Come Home.
According to the data from the largest online platform and a non-governmental organization dedicated to locating missing children in China, there are 4,296 trafficking cases reported and 4,499 illegal adoption reported between 1949 and 2018.
That's just according to one website, though, and only takes into account the ones that were reported. Official figures are quite hard to come by, but estimates of the number of kids that go missing each year hover around 20,000 and go as high as 200,000. Jingxian says there are a number of reasons. The main reason, she says, is what's been called China's cultural obsession with boys. Parents want sons for their earning potential and to look after them in old age. This has partly led to a raging illicit trade in young children, particularly boys from unsuspecting parents, into the hands of other Chinese couples willing to pay. A baby boy can fetch as much as $16,000 on the black market. That's double the amount for a girl.
Normally, the abandoned children were aged under 1 year old, and the trafficked children were aged between 3 to 5 years old, and boys are much favored by the adopting families.
A second important factor, says Jingxian, is the one-child policy. This was introduced in 1979 in an attempt to curb the country's ever-expanding population, which at that point was already nearing 1 billion. In the past, other countries have tried to limit the number of children parents can have, including India, Vietnam, and Iran. But China was the first to enshrine the one-child diktat in the law. For Jingxian, the policy just intensified this cultural obsession with boys.
Because of the one-child policy, many parents, they had to abandon their daughters, or many parents, they even steal, kidnapped, or buy other people's sons as their own son and deceive these children that we are the birth family, you are our birth child.
So, according to Jingxian, pre-existing patriarchal attitudes were catalysed by the world's most stringent child policy to create an environment where adoptions and abductions were widespread. But it doesn't end there. There's a third component which Jingxian says has had an inordinate impact: the foreign adoption industry. Because while many abducted children were sold to parents within China, many more wound up in orphanages before being adopted abroad, making the orphanages rich in the process. One of those children is Nikwi Hoogland.
So when I was born in 1994, I was born during the one-child policy in China. And my parents in China, they already had a daughter, so I couldn't stay in the family.
Nikwi was born on the East Coast, near Shanghai, the second child in the family. Her birth parents knew they couldn't keep her. Punishments for disobeying the policy were severe, ranging from fines to suddenly finding yourself without a job. to forced sterilizations and abortions. So they came up with a plan that Nikwi would be raised by someone else.
Handed to family members to keep me in the family, and my dad and my mom really tried to hold me as close as they could within the family. However, a lot of family members couldn't provide that option to take care of me, and then I ended up by a very far away aunt from my mother, and I went there as a baby.
Nikwi has no memory of this. She's found all this out as an adult. So many of the details are lost. What she does know is that after numerous family members were unable to take her in, her parents decided it would be best to move her far away to stay with a distant aunt of her mum's. Her dad dropped her off and, believing it to be her best chance of happiness and survival, left her there. But somehow the authorities found out. They turned up at the aunt's house, arrested her, and took Nikwi away, who was still just a tiny baby at this point. Years later, as an adult, Nikwi will think her parents gave her away willingly. It takes a long time to discover the truth, that even her birth dad didn't know where she'd gone.
My dad went for work away, and a year later he came back, and then he found out that I was gone.
By the time he found out that the authorities had taken his daughter away, it was too late. Unbeknownst to her parents, Nikwi had been taken to an orphanage. She says the authorities knew exactly what they were doing.
They did it on purpose, getting me out of my habitat. I only know that it's from the moment that I was adopted to the Netherlands, it was business.
She still has a few documents which tell her what happened next. It didn't take long for a couple from the Netherlands to turn up at the orphanage and adopt her. Nikwi still has the receipts, which show they paid the orphanage, in the form of a donation, 15,000 euros.
To the orphanage and to the in-between persons. So there's 3 organizations in the Netherlands that provide adoption, and they get money, but also the orphanage in my birth country, they got money to, get the baby food or sleeping stuff. I'm not sure where they needed so much money for, but they got a lot of money.
So, at just 9 months old, Nikwi landed in the Netherlands in May 1995. She describes her childhood as rough. She says she never felt like she belonged.
Not only because of my looks, not only because of all my questions that I have that I didn't have answered for a long time, but also I think from the perspective of being such an in-between person. I will never belong with the Dutch people, and as I will also never belong with the Chinese people.
But in 2018, when she was 24, her mindset began to shift.
I was not into adoption or being Chinese or being Asian. I was actually very anti. I didn't want to have anything with my roots, with being adopted. And my dad in the Netherlands, he said there is an event with 2 Chinese adoptees talking about how they found their birth parents back. And I was like, well, I'm not interested because, I'm just not into that kind of stuff.
She agreed to go though, and gradually got curious about her own story. She got in touch with a Chinese organisation that helps adoptees find their birth parents. They put a call out around China, a poster with her name and details. And from there, it all happened amazingly quickly.
And little did I know that my dad was actually looking for me for 25 years. So he found me back within 2 weeks. My father, he recognized me immediately. Actually, he saw my picture on the poster and he said look, this could be our daughter, right? And then he just, I think, looked at my face. I look exactly like my mother, and I came from the same birthplace. I had the same birth dates.
A DNA test confirmed it was true. And in October 2019, Nikwi travelled to China.
I felt so at peace with them because when my dad looked at me and he spread his arms towards me, the only thing I wanted to was just run into his arms, give him the biggest hug, and actually never let go. And also my mom came to me and I looked at her, I was like, yeah, you do look like me. But I was crying and they were crying, everyone was crying, and it was very emotional. And I do feel the warmth of their bodies around me.
In the years since they were reunited, Nikwi and her birth parents have pieced together what happened since the authorities took her away. The aunt's arrest, the orphanage, the donation. But she says she can't even be sure that those few details she does have are correct. We've spoken with other researchers in this area who've told us that Chinese orphanages often falsify the kids' records to make them more attractive to foreigners. For instance, younger kids fetch a higher price. Nikwi doesn't know if this happened in her case, but the uncertainty is unsettling. And even after finding her birth parents, which many adoptees aren't able to, Nikwi still questions where she fits into the world.
I was thinking okay, but did I gain what I was looking for? And the answer was no, because back then I really wanted a family and people who understood me to the fullest, but they don't speak my language and they don't understand the culture of the Netherlands, and they don't understand how it is to be an adoptee, an Asian adoptee in the Netherlands.
The numbers are surprising. China first opened its doors to international adoption in 1992. And since then, more than 160,000 children have been adopted abroad. The biggest market? The United States. Around half of those 160,000, mainly girls, have ended up there. Jingxian, the sociological researcher, says foreign adoptions are much more lucrative for the orphanages than ones within China. Reports say American parents would pay a donation of up to $25,000 to adopt. But in the 80s and 90s, this was still a relatively unknown phenomenon, so it made sense for Li Jingzhi to focus her search within China. By now, she's travelled all around the country and has even become a regular face on national news channels. She'd sometimes see notices about missing children, but thought nothing of it. That this was in fact a wider systemic trend won't be discovered for years to come. The one-child policy comes to an end in 2016, allowing all parents to have 2 children. And fairly quickly, grim stories about its legacy and the reality of China's missing children are becoming increasingly more publicised. Adoptees have been coming forward in their masses, searching for their birth parents. That same year, the government sets up a central DNA database, and by 2020, say they've helped reunite more than 4,000 families. The emotional reunions are broadcast on the state TV channel China Central Television, or CCTV. And Li Jingzhi? By now she's distributed hundreds of thousands of flyers, and will later say she believes she's followed a total of 300 false leads to see if they were her son. And then, much like Nikwi, everything changes in an instant. It's Sunday the 10th of May, 2020, and in spite of the lockdown rules, Chinese mums are celebrating as best they can because it's Mother's Day. And in the city of Xi'an, Li Jingzhi's phone rings. They found him. Weeks beforehand, a photo had emerged of a man who matched her son's description. Police ran it through facial recognition software and discovered the man currently lives in the city of Chengdu, about 700 kilometres southwest of Xi'an in the neighbouring province. Police convinced him to take a DNA test, and the results have just come back. It's a match. Li Jingzhi has to wait 8 long days before she can be reunited with her son. Chinese state TV wants to broadcast the reunion, so she has to wait. Finally, on the 18th of May 2020, Li Jingzhi and her ex-husband stand at the front of a grand ceremonial hall in Xi'an before dozens of cameras, microphones and policemen. It's live streamed on CCTV. She gives a short statement, and then the cameras turn to the heavy wooden double doors just off to the side. There's a pause, and suddenly the doors open. A man with glasses, gently balding, is standing there. He shouts "Mother" and runs into his parents' arms. Li Jingzhi's crying can just be heard above the emotional violin music playing over the broadcast. She draws back, takes hold of her son's hand and says, "I won't let him leave me anymore." So where had he been? This is what's since been found out. A year after he was taken by traffickers from outside the hotel, just meters away from his dad, Jaja was sold to a childless couple for 6,000 yuan. That's about $800 in today's money. They gave him a new name, Gu Ningning. He grew up in Chengdu, where he married and opened his own home decorating business. Incredibly, he'll later say he even remembers seeing Li Jingzhi on the television a few years before they were reunited. He thought the boy in the photo she held up looked a bit like him, but thought nothing more of it, until the police got in touch. Today, it seems he's taken his new family into his stride. He visits them in Xi'an and brings them presents. Li Jingzhi shows him photos, hoping to jog his memory, but he has no memory of his life as Jaja. She says that she can only wish him well from a distance. "I know where my son is. I know he's still alive. That's enough." Nikwi says it can often be very difficult for adoptees to adjust to their new reality.
I completely understand how it is to not have one set of parents, but suddenly have two set of parents, and even, in my case, have siblings on the other side of the world. And in his case, he is, of course, living a little bit more nearby. But it's a lot of responsibility to have extra, to have another family in your life.
Since 2021, Chinese parents have been allowed to have 3 children. More recently, towards the end of 2024, the Chinese government announced they'd be banning foreign adoptions. The impacts of this are yet to be seen. The number of Chinese parents still searching for a child is staggering. Baby Come Home, a charity which Li Jingzhi now volunteers with, currently has 51,000 parents on its books. Meanwhile, Jingxian says the abduction industry continues. If anything, she says, the traffickers are getting more sophisticated and operations are now moving online.
China's illicit adoption market still goes on. Online platforms are noted at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the illegal adoption. I would say in this case, the child trafficking crimes basically were rooted by the same reason as the other human trafficking happened in the rest of the world. It's because of the profit.
This was True Crime Reports, a global crime series from Al Jazeera. In our next episode, we're in Kenya, where in 2018, one of the world's most prominent investigators of the illegal wildlife trade was found murdered at his stately home. Thank you for joining. See you next week.